So the fact that my wife went on those forums and discussed Scientology makes her a terrorist. They've run other bizarre operations. They've flown people all around the globe trying to intimidate my family members. They even sent their dirty tricks private investigator to intimidate my mother twice. It's interesting the way that Scientology kind of combines some of these urges in the human spirit. And let me just make it real clear. I really don't have a problem if people want to look into their 5 billion year history in the galaxy and try to bring up memories of where they were a million years ago on another planet. In fact, I've said often in my writings that that's my favorite part of Scientology. I wish they would be more open with it. The space opera is great. But instead, it's the secrecy, like just a basic issue with them. I've always pointed this out. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, it takes about a minute to explain what their basic belief is. Yep. And a Bible is free, okay? And you can go through it and somebody will explain to you within a few minutes exactly what the basic tenets are. In Scientology, it takes years of time, hundreds of thousands of dollars, before they even begin to clue you in what the whole point of this whole exercise is. And I just find that really troubling.
Well, and I find it troubling too, but also fascinating because as a rapacious capitalist and as somebody who's been involved in everything from multi-level marketing to all kinds of sales jobs, I'm a big fan of, caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of, Willy Loman and all the tropes that come along with knocking on the door and asking for the sale. And don't take no for an answer. And here's the alternative. And here's the second effort. And here's the third effort. And I've been, to take it back to Tony Robbins and take it back to, I can't tell you how many organizations like that I've visited in the last 10 years and spoken at, right? And the room's full of people who have paid their money and they're there because they want to come out a slightly more enlightened person. I'm good with all of it, right up to the point where you say you're a church and right up to the point where I feel, and I can't articulate it as well as I'd like, but you know when you're being manipulated, Tony. You know when there's a thumb in the small of your back. And when you start sprinkling money on top of that feeling and then put the imprimatur of organized religion and tax-exempt status on top of everything else, that's where the wheels come off the bus for me. So I just, maybe I'm selling beyond the sale. I've got no problem with all kinds of things that are involved with Scientology, right up to the water's edge, where my tax dollars are supporting it.
Yeah.
That's when I kind of feel like, wait. And ultimately, that's why you're on this program, because I want to know if you think we're going to live to see the day when the IRS wakes up one day and realizes, or remembers perhaps, where they put their spine.
Yeah, I know. It's difficult. I have thought that, Scientology has been shrinking. It has less influence than it did before. It has a lot less influence in Hollywood, for example, and it's just got fewer numbers of people. It still has a lot of money. David Miscavige has a ton of money he can call on to spend on attorneys and private investigators. But it does feel like this organization is weaker than it once was, and I have wondered if the federal government is waiting for some point when it's a little bit more of a pushover. And then, but Mike Rinder once said it to me. I thought he explained it perfectly. He said, "Look, there are these middle managers whose names you never know at the Department of Justice, at the IRS. They are the ones who really have to make this decision about, are we going to go after this investigation?" And he said they know they are making a decision that is going to take up the rest of their careers. And that's why we don't see them acting very quickly, is they know what a fight this is going to be for so many years. So I think, I don't think there's any question that Scientology is in violation of the agreement it has with the IRS, that it is harming people. We see that people coming forward all the time. It's really a question of when is the government going to have the will and the interest to do something. And I've talked to individual agents who are very interested, but it comes down to their bosses and whether they're ready to make that calculation.
It seems to me that those middle managers you're talking about, right? They're a lot like cops or detectives in a way, who are also a lot like investigative reporters or beat reporters, right? I mean, you've only got so much time, and you got an editor who's drumming his or her fingers on the desk. They're waiting for the next story and so forth. You said yourself 28 years ago, you're looking for something juicy. But did you think
Right.
you were going to find something that would consume you for the next 30 years? Right? Like, middle manager can't do that. They've got other
Right.
they got other things to do. And so I get it. You're right. It's like there probably wasn't some big meeting where a bunch of well-intended people said, screw it. They probably all just came to their own decision in their own way, like Sisyphus, who just one day said, this frickin' rock, man, I'm never going to get it up the hill.
Well, one thing that might affect that calculus is the conviction of Danny Masterson. This is something I first broke the news of the LAPD investigation in 2017. I've been reporting this story every day for the last 6 years. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was announced, and Danny Masterson was handcuffed and led away. He's going to be sentenced on August 4th. He's looking at 30 years to life in prison. And what was really interesting to me is not just these terrible, awful crimes that he's accused of committing against these women who were, like him, Scientologists. He is a Scientologist now, but they were at the time. But it's all the things we heard about Scientology trying to keep this from getting to law enforcement, and that these women felt that they were being punished for coming forward as victims. So much we heard about Scientology policy that encourages this. It was a brutal, brutal trial for the Church of Scientology. And I really believe Leah Remini and some of these other people that have much more clout than I do feel that this is the kind of outcome that may begin to move those government officials who have been maybe thinking about it, but now they've got literally a criminal conviction of a well-known Scientology celebrity who the prosecutor said it outright. This man was protected by the Church of Scientology, even though it knew the horrible crimes he was committing. That's the kind of sea change that might encourage some government officials to do something.
What is the short version? I mean, is it even right to say, what is he accused of at this point? He's been found guilty.
What is he
so maybe the question is,
right?
What did he do?
He's now
What
a
did he
convicted.
do?
He's now a convicted serial rapist. Danny Masterson, had been. He was Stephen Hyde on That 70s Show, and it was right around the time he got that role. He was dating a woman that I refer to as Jane Doe 3. Some publications use at least part of her name. I tend not to. Jane Doe 3. He was dating her. They had been together for several years. Her allegation is that they went to a restaurant, had a glass of wine, and she doesn't remember anything until the next afternoon. When she woke up, she was injured. She was bleeding. She went to the bathroom. She was in great pain, and it was, her bottom. And she found Masterson and asked him what happened. And she says he admitted, I had sex with you there. And she was so outraged that he had done this. That's when she decided to go to the Church of Scientology to turn him in. The Church of Scientology, she said, my boyfriend raped me. And the first thing she said she was told was, don't use that word. You can't rape somebody in a relationship. And then they punished her. She ended up having to do an ethics program where she had to get his car washed in order to make amends to him. The second incident occurred in 2003.
Sorry, Tony, but I think it's worth pointing out. Okay, so 2003, before #MeToo.
Oh, yeah.
Before, all right, way back. But not the trial, right? The trial's coming, that was what, 6 years ago when that began.
Let me quickly, let me do it a little more quickly because I know there's a lot to it. He ended up, the other two women were Scientologists at the time, but they were only acquaintances. He was not dating them. They each claimed that same thing. They had a drink. They felt suspiciously intoxicated, and he attacked them. He raped them brutally at his Hollywood Hills home. all three of these attacks occurred in that home. The one woman that's referred to as Jane Doe 1 not only went to the Church of Scientology and they told her you can't go to the police, but she went to the police anyway. In June 2004, Scientology swarmed that investigation, got it killed. And so then, 10 to 15 years passes. It's only in 2015, 2016, when Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3, for the first time, learn about each other and then find out about Jane Doe 2. That's when they decided to go to the police again, because they had no idea there were other victims. They always assumed they were the only ones that had been attacked by Masterson. So it was only in 2015, 2016, when they learned about each other, that they went to the police. Now, it's too late to try Danny Masterson on a single count of rape in 2016, 2017, if it occurred in 2001, 2003. However, California has a very harsh law called the one strike law for people who have committed multiple violent felonies. And under that law, if you have multiple, that's the key word, more than one, then a rape carries a possible sentence of 15 years to life. And once there's a potential life sentence involved, there is no statute of limitations. That's how the DA's office was able to bring this in 2020 when they charged him, was under the one strike law as multiple forcible rapes. So they brought 3 counts knowing they had to have 2. And that's what they got. On May 31st, the jury came back, gave them guilty on count 1, guilty on count 2. They hung on the 3rd, but they had the 2. So now he's facing 30 years to life in prison.
Of the 3 Jane Does, 1, 2, and 3, how many went back to the church to complain?
None of, Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3 went to the church to complain. Jane Doe 2 said that the reason she did not go to complain to the church about Danny is that she had complained about a previous boyfriend who was a Scientologist, and they had punished her for it. This was the consistent testimony of all these women, that when they came forward to report a rape to the church, they were punished as victims. And so Jane Doe 2's testimony was, I'm not going to try and turn in Danny Masterson after what they did to me the last time. So she did not bring allegations to the church, but the other 2 did.
So that's the damning thing. The cops didn't know necessarily that there was a pattern in practice going on, but the church certainly knew that 2 people had made an identical complaint about one of their celebrities. Sorry.
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the characteristics of Scientology is they keep incredible records and they interrogate people. We know that Danny Masterson was interrogated about this stuff by the church. The LAPD could never get those documents from the church, but we know that the church knew about these incidents.
If that's the case, then couldn't these Jane Does collectively get together and sue Scientology for their participation in their rapes?
That's a great question. They are suing Scientology over harassment. They say that since they came forward to the LAPD in 2016, they have been under constant surveillance, hacking, harassment, even the poisoning of their pets. And so they filed a lawsuit against Scientology and Masterson in 2019. That lawsuit has been on hold while the criminal case was going on. Now that the criminal case is over, the civil case is scheduled to get back underway on June 28th, I believe. Scientology has already said that the first thing it's going to do is file what's called an anti-SLAPP motion, which is really cynical because I don't know if you know much about anti-SLAPP statutes, but they were developed to protect protesters from Monsanto and stuff. Big bullies would sue small people to keep their mouths quiet, and so this a statute's developed where you could ask the judge, look at this lawsuit. Is it legitimate, or are they just trying to silence the little guy? And so Scientology is going to use that. They've already said they're going to basically say Scientology is being silenced by these bullies, these women.
Well, of course
they're the
upside
little
down.
Guy, right?
Right.
They bought the Cult Awareness Network. Of course they're going to do this. Of course they are. Well, it seems, Chuck, to your point, I mean, yeah, it feels like there could be a class action, but the really damning thing is 4, 5, and 6, right? So if the church knows they got a bad actor, if they know that 2 of their parishioners have complained credibly about being raped, that means that 4, 5, and 6 could have been prevented had they come forward. Those are the 3 that ought to get together. And, that's if you know there's a pedophile in the playground, right? If you know it and you're the teacher, well, you've just entered into a different kind of world there. It seems to me. I'm not a lawyer, but
Jane Doe 3 made this point really passionately that what motivated her to finally come forward was she was so horrified to realize that if she had done more back in 2001 and 2002, then maybe these other attacks would not have happened. She feels terrible about that, and it's what motivated her to come forward when she did. I think I think people are thinking along these lines, Mike. I think there may be some more. I think other people realize that this does now open new doors.
I mean, the past is fun to unpack, but what's the future? Like, what's the ideal thing that could happen from your perspective at this point?
I'd like a serious government investigation of what Scientology is doing with its tax-exempt status. We know that it's spending incredible amounts of money harassing people, hiring private investigators, smearing people like Leah Remini all the time. I think it's time the government took that a little more seriously. I think there may be some litigation about that coming. I've heard some things. I don't know for sure. But, I think maybe with the conviction of Danny Masterson, a tide has begun to change. We know that the public is more aware of Scientology thanks to Leah Remini and Alex Gibney, Spanky Taylor. And I think maybe it's time for the government to do something. But in the meantime, Mike, I can't rely on that. I'm just going to watch this organization day after day. First of all, because I'm fascinated by it. Second of all, because there are people who are just desperate to hear about their loved ones that are still in it that they can't talk to. And so my day-to-day work does not rely on that sort of, outcome. It's just what are they up to today? And they're always up to something new. They just can't help themselves. They're always infiltrating groups and trying new tricks and operations. I mean, that's kind of what's so fascinating about them. They're still stuck in the 60s. They still think that they're fighting SMERSH. I mean, they literally think they're fighting SMERSH, like James Bond did. And
what did that stand for again?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. L. Ron Hubbard
It was
would
just
literally...
one of the army of angry acronyms.
Right.
Yeah.
L. Ron Hubbard would literally tell his followers that they were fighting SMERSH, which was, I don't know, out of a James Bond novel or something. So... that's what's entertaining about them, but it's also, scary that they just won't stop. They keep trying to destroy people. They tried to destroy Paulette Cooper in the 60s and 70s, and that's what I wrote a book about, and they're still trying to destroy people today. They've run elaborate operations against me. Mike, you can't believe the amounts of money they spend trying to harass and intimidate me. I mean, it's insane.
Well, look,
what have they done to you particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I told Alex Gibney about this. I told Leah Remini about this. One of the things they did, for example, was they hired well, first of all, let me just say, they never answer my requests for comment. They never just call me up and say, hey, we had a problem with your story here. We'd like to see something changed. I'd be happy to talk to them about that. They don't have the guts to talk to me directly. So what they do, for example, they hired an out-of-work New York Daily News reporter to pretend that he was working on a story that my wife was a terrorist in order to freak out her employers. Now, my wife was interested also in this stuff, and she had gone on those boards, the anonymous boards 10 years ago, where people were joking around about Scientology. Well, Scientology considers Anonymous a terrorist organization. So the fact that my wife went on those forums and discussed Scientology makes her a terrorist. And, fortunately, Mike Rinder helped us out. He wrote her employers a letter to explain to them that this is Scientology. They're not serious. This is a cynical attempt to hurt Tony Ortega. And her bosses understood. So I was fortunate. And I just want to say how grateful I am to Mike Rinder. He's got some new challenges now. We're all rooting for him. I thought he did an excellent job on your podcast. He's a good friend of mine. And he came to my aid when I needed that. They've run other bizarre operations. They've flown people all around the globe trying to intimidate my family members. They even sent their dirty tricks private investigator to intimidate my mother twice. But she doesn't scare.
Oh man,
she doesn't
they
scare
got the
so
mother
easy.
involved.
Yeah.
No, that's look. You know what? Please give Mike our regards for those people listening who didn't hear the prior podcast. Mike, unlike you, Tony, was an avowed Scientologist. He was way up the food chain, number 3, as I recall.
Right.
And he got out, wrote a heck of a book called A Billion Years. And so, yeah, between he and Lee and you and your, it's the underground bunker, right?
Thank you.
You've
yes.
been running for some time. You just mentioned money, and I just want to, not to put too fine a point on it, but however much money they're raising through the auditing process and through their parishioners, it must pale in comparison to their real estate holdings. I mean, these guys own a lot of property.
This has been the new focus of David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology. He's put less focus on the money that comes in through processing and training. He's just asking his wealthy followers for just giant donations, and they have been giving them to him. He's just raising huge amounts of money and turning it into real estate. They're replacing older orgs, they call them, that's their word for churches, with newer, what they call ideal orgs. And these things cost $10 or $20 million each. He's already built more than 60 of them around the world. They sit empty, but there's incredible amounts of money invested in those properties. And he's begging them for even more money. Nancy Cartwright, who is the voice of Bart Simpson, is a very dedicated Scientologist. They recently celebrated her because she has now given them $21 million just in straight donations. There's another couple. They've actually split up, but they're still giving money separately, who acknowledge that they have given Miscavige more than $300 million for him to build these, new initiatives and things. We estimate he's sitting on at least 3 or 4 billion. And remember, this is a small group.
Yeah.
People do crave quality journalism, and I hope they understand how to recognize it. Sometimes it's a little difficult. I think people are grabbing onto stuff that's just very, clickbaity and not very worthwhile.
Well, part of the solution could be going to Substack and subscribing to your channel, right?
I do my best to bring people something interesting to read every day. It's TonyOrtega.substack.com. Please at least sign up for free emails so you get everything I write. For those people who do subscribe, there's some extras and some podcasts that they only get access to. But I really do have a very supportive community that they just want to hear something new about Scientology every day. And that's the goal I set for myself, is I try to bring everybody every morning something they have not heard yet about Scientology. And that's a big challenge. I have lots of readers that were in Scientology 20, 30 years, and they know it forwards and backwards. So trying to bring something new for them, well, it's a tough goal, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, well, maybe there's no new ideas, but it's a wheel. The wheel is spinning, and things that feel old all of a sudden can feel new again. I mean, our conversation, I think, is a perfect example. I can't believe that 28 years ago, I was sitting at my buddy's house in Phoenix reading your first serious piece, published in essentially a free paper. I mean, what the hell? I picked it up at the Biltmore at a coffee shop.
Yep.
That's how I met Tony Ortega, a guy who I didn't really ever think about again until all of a sudden Spanky Taylor comes into my life, and there you are in that excellent documentary, which is worth plugging again. If you haven't seen Going Clear, find it. Pay $1.99 for it if they're charging, or watch it for free. It's worth it. Read everything Tony Ortega is writing. Check out the, is it the Underground Bunker or just the Bunker?
It's the Underground Bunker is the name of the Substack, yeah.
Yeah, because who would put a bunker above ground? That'd be stupid.
It just seems counterintuitive, really.
It's a fluid situation, folks. The truth is out there. Tony's been searching for it a long time. I hope you guys found some listening to us here today. You're welcome back anytime. Anything else you want to plug before we say goodbye?
No, just I want to say thank you again. You've been one of the few people to speak out when so many others have been afraid to, and I really respect you for that.
Well, you know what? I'm either brave or stupid. We'll see. And let me know how it works out with Substack. If you get shit canned from there, well, we might have an opening at Mike Rowe Works. Chuck.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Chuck.
Oh,
Thank you,
yeah,
Mike.
he's saying you'll replace me.
Now, you know what? I'll probably fire you next week. But for now, you're still safe. All right, everybody.
Good deal.
Adios.